Hello, one and all. This is Florarena here with a late night reading of a story that is titled Diamond Tiara Hunts Down and Systematically Murders Bad OCs. Yes, it is seriously titled that. Now, before I begin, I would like to explain a few things. My current Let's Play has, well, according to the creator of the game, epic mode is manageable just as long as you pack some equip, so until he gets that sorted out, which I don't know when that's going to be, it's going to be put on hiatus. Then I'm also doing dress rehearsals. Now, this story, much like my Let's Play, will also contain voice acting. It's kind of needed for characterization purposes, I'm sorry. And it's either now or never. I need to practice on male voices anyway. So, this is Diamond Tiara hunts down and systematically murders bad OCs. The dramatic reading thereof. Without further ado, let's begin. Moonlight spilled across the linoleum floor as the front doors of Ponyville High School were thrown open, casting a lengthy shadow in front of the petite young mare, who then sprinted through them. Wide-eyed and heaving for breath, she skidded to a stop and slammed the door shut behind her, nearly tripping over her own hooves in the process. Normally, school would be the last place in the world she'd want to find herself stuck in. Besides being stuffy and boring, it was completely pointless for a mare with as much natural intelligence as her. But right now, her pseudo-relatable sense of suburban enlightenment and mastery of the normal curriculum didn't matter. Right now, all she needed was to get out of sight before she could get in, before she could find her. The young mare swallowed back a despondent wail and awkwardly turned around, pushing herself into a run as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from outside. Her hooves clattered delicately against the floor tiles, and squares of light from the small windows over the lockers illuminated totally lame posters on the walls, and gleaming strands of silver and gold hair hanging over her face. After about 50 feet, she swiveled to the left and cut down another hallway, and behind her she heard the front door slam open again. She was running out of time. She had to find some place to hide now. The first unlocked door she found led her into a dark room filled with high black-top tables and metal stools, and for a moment she couldn't help but wrinkle her nose and groan. Of all the classrooms to stumble into, it had to be the stuffy old chemistry lab. The only thing worse than gym class and home ec class and remedial shapes and numbers class, she only had to take that one because she didn't apply herself last year, was chemistry class. Everything in here had a musty, chemical smell to it, and every time she tried to read her really obscure poetry book from Barnes & Noble, she was always interrupted by some unassumingly dopey colt who wouldn't shut up about sports and healthy long-term relationships and video games and other stupid things like that. The only thing that redeemed it were her lab partners, 3 smoking hot guys who would constantly vie for her affection and whom she could successfully tell apart almost 60% of the time. It was like a love triangle, only with 4 sides. A love square, that means one of the guys was gay for the other 2, or the sound of hoof steps snapped her out of her mind-escape brooding session, and her heart sank as she heard them got louder and closer. She dove behind a table and banged her shoulder on one of the stools, just in time to be out of sight before the door to the lab burst open. For a heart-stopping moment, the room was silent, and And then, from the unseen mouth of her pursuer came a deep, almost sympathetic chuckle. "Well, aren't you a clever one?" The hunter's voice was high-pitched and syrupy sweet, the kind that could be kind and lovable one moment, and absolutely vicious the second you let your guard down. Her tone was somewhere between those two extremes at the moment, like she was both happy and furious at the same time. At what precisely, and which one was taking precedence, the young mare hidden on the other side of the lab couldn't be sure. All she could be sure about was that she really didn't want to find out. "I gotta hand it to you. You lasted a lot longer than any of those other little health spawns you run around with," the hunter went on. Her hooves beat out a terrifying tune as she closed the door behind her and began to walk further inside the lab, each step echoing in a way that made it impossible to tell where it was coming from. "The rest of them were embarrassingly easy to find, but you were smart about it. While your disgusting friends wormed out into the sunlight and left their slimy trails all over town, you stayed in the shadows, just biding your time and hoping you wouldn't be noticed." The hunter's hooves slowed down and went quiet, and she laughed again. "I can see why Captain Hooves trusts you so much. Then again, who doesn't trust you? Every pony just adores a shy, smart, perfectly normal pony with a glittering silver and gold mane, and every boy in school wrapped around her perfectly normal hoof. Don't they, sweetheart?" The young mare bit her tongue to keep from screaming and slowly began to itch forward on her knees. She could keep from being spotted and work her way back around to the door. Maybe she could still get out of here. She could get across town fast enough. Maybe Captain Hooves could protect her. "Of course, I'll admit, it's mostly my fault you survived this long." The hunter's sing-song voice was just as sweet and sour as it had been before, but it wasn't accompanied by the clunk of her hooves hitting the ground this time. Dredging you guys out of the gene pool used to be a challenge, but now, well, I suppose while I was busy being unbelievably successful, I've lost a bit of my edge." A small whooshing sound caught the young mare's attention, and then the screeching, ear-piercing sound of metal scraping against epoxy resin tabletop sent a bolt of lightning down her spine. "A bit," the hunter said with a simpering, wry twist to her words, "but not too much." The mare, hidden in the darkness, grit her teeth and kept crawling, aiming herself towards the back of the classroom as the hunter's footsteps crossed in front of the whiteboard. "So, what's it gonna be?" the hunter called out. "You gonna quit being such a baby and make this easy for us? Or do I have to keep chasing you around all night like those dark, mysterious stallions you keep leading on? Either way's fine. I mean, I'm flexible. Just figured I'd let you know it won't make a difference in the end. I will find you. I always find ponies like you." The young mare shuddered and almost bumped into a stool again, but managed to collect herself in time to avoid giving herself away. She had to stay calm. She had to stay focused. "It's because you're predictable," the hunter went on. "It's like no matter how hard you try, there's a part that wants to be seen. Like you just can't resist showing off how special you are. Isn't that ironic? I mean, whoever would have guessed being perfect would be the biggest flaw of them all?" The hunter was striding down the center of the lab now, pausing to look behind each table she'd passed. She had reached the back of the room where she'd corner her prey in a few seconds. "But the thing is, you're not perfect. That's the real kicker. None of you are. That's always one thing. Just one teensy little smudge on your face or quirk in your personality, as if that alone could justify your repulsive existence, as if that alone could make you a real pony." For the first time, the mare in the back of the lab saw the hunter's hooves step into view, pink as cotton candy, and wrapped in what looked like spotless white tape. "And do you know what? I think I might know what yours is. The mare was still edging back out of sight when it happened. Her hind hoof trembled and slipped out from under her, knocking against a side table, standing up against the wall before she could pull it back in. She just turned in time. She turned just in time to see a black glass beaker wobbling on the table's edge, too late to do anything but watch it tilt and tumble and fall to the floor. Tiny shards of glass pelted her neck as the beaker shattered on impact, and Hunter's head snapped as she zeroed in on the sound. "Clumsy, aren't we?" the pink pursuer crooned. "How original." The thought of being courageous and standing up for herself had never once occurred to the young mare covered in beaker bits before, and it certainly wasn't about to happen now. She was up on her hooves and sprinting for the door in an instant, almost fast enough to make it there before a silvery blur that whistled through the air and embedded itself in the door frame with a vicious stunk. After coming to a screeching halt just inches away from the sudden obstruction, she just stood in place for a few moments, staring at her own terrified reflection in the weapon's spotless metal blade, and gasping for breath that wouldn't come. "Leaving so soon?" She swallowed hard and shifted her gaze to the left, and the hunter's toothy grin bloomed into view. "You know, it's rude to leave a party early," she said, "especially when I'm the guest of honor." "Please," the young mare stammered. "Please don't hurt me. I didn't mean—" Oh, spare me the weepy monologue, please," the hunter said, rolling her eyes as she caught her sword in the crook of her hoof and easily yanked it free like it weighed nothing at all. She spun it once in a lazy loop by her side, then flicked her ankle and sheathed it on her belt. "Not like it ever works the first time anyway." The young mare bit her lip and swallowed again. She tried to force herself to look away from the jagged gouge left behind in the doorframe, as was the case with almost nothing else in her life, didn't succeed. What do you want?" she managed to ask. The hunter shrugged. "Oh, this and that." Without turning around, she reached back for another sheath on her opposite flank and grabbed hold of a jet black hilt sticking out of it. "I think I'll start with this." The hunter's second sword was twice as long as her first, sharp on only one side, and curved back from its hilt up to a tapered point. It was powerful and beautifully crafted, and the mare, currently quaking at the sight of it, might have been quite impressed had she been able to stop cringing long enough to get another good look. "Oh, calm down for Pony's sake," the hunter said. We haven't even been properly introduced yet. So, you are..." The young mare opened her mouth and worked her jaw up and down, but no words would come. She stared at the ceiling, and she stared at the sword, and when she turned away to stare at the hole in the door frame again, the cold sensation of steel against her neck sent ice water shooting through her veins. The hunter sighed, and a gentle tug from the blade beneath her chin slowly turned her eyes back towards her tight-lipped captor. "Over here, klutzy Kathy. Lonely happiness," she finally said, searching desperately for some kind of approval in the hunter's eyes. "I like being alone." The hunter rolled the name around in her mouth for a bit, then spat it back out with an extra dose of venom. "Lonely happiness. That's adorable." With a ladylike grunt, she stabbed her sword into the ground and left it quivering upright by her side. "I'm Diamond Tiara. I like driving my enemies before me and hearing the lamentations of their illiterate creators." "Not quite as fitting as yours, I'll admit, but hey." Diamond paused for a moment, and an impish grin split across her face. "No pony's perfect." Lonely's eyes darted towards the door again, but only for a moment. She'd never been very confrontational, and while that had been precisely the trait every boy she met seemed to desire in her, it wasn't doing her any favors here. "Never figured out I was a hunter, huh?" Diamond said, strutting around so she was between Lonely and the only way out of the room. "I'm not surprised. When the whole world revolves around you, I suppose it gets a bit tough seeing anything outside its orbit." I'll stop here with the recording and continue with part 2 of this dramatic reading.